Hello, this is video 3 of my series on the shoulder and rotator cuff muscles and tendons. So on the first two, there was the introduction and also about the muscles of the rotator cuff group and how they provide movement and stability. So on this short talk, which I've always promised to do within 5 minutes, as I've been reprimanded for being too long on videos. So I hope to go through what happens when the rotator cuff group of muscles and tendons go wrong. So the main pathology affecting tendons are tears, and they're classified into 4 groups of tears. The first one is when you tear less than a quarter or less than 25%, which is classified as a small tear. And where it means it can split that longitudinally down the tendon or across. Normally it's longitudinal. And so if it's less than 25%, it's a small tear. 25 to 50, up to half, from a quarter to a half, is a medium-sized tears. More than 50% are large tears. And then there are complete tears. Complete tears aren't great news. If a tendon goes, for example, the supraspinatus is a classic one. Person, especially, which I'll go into, as tendons age, they become weaker. And some people can be unfortunate enough to get a complete tear. So when that happens, if you ask a person to lift their shoulder, there's just nothing. It doesn't move at all. So and the only treatment for that is surgery, because if there's no tendon there, you can't work on anything. No tendons can take over from lifting the arm up. So it's a visit to your friendly surgeon to have it stitched back together. And in that group of people, it's quite important to have it done quite quickly, because slowly on the tendon just goes back, it withdraws from life, I suppose. And the repairs are difficult, if not impossible, and then you lose movement, and then you're running out of options as to what to do. Now, the main thing about what I wanted to talk about tendon tears is much more common in older age. There are cells called tenocytes which actually form the tendon, and like with everything, as we get older, they don't work as efficiently, not as quickly. So the tendon just becomes more fragile. You could almost say almost like tissue paper. However, there's one way to prevent this happening, and that is keeping up strength into older age. When I mean older age, I mean anything from the age of 35, 40 upwards. So if you keep up shoulder exercise, strengthening, shoulder press, things like that, you're much less likely to get these, I was going to say, conditions of, shall we say, older age. So this is why I keep on harboring on about keeping up activity, because if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's much more complicated to fix, to have treated. So it's always worthwhile. I mean, we all, in lockdown talk about, sort of aerobic activity, which is very important cardiovascularly. But the other thing that goes as you get older is muscle strength. So don't just run, do a few press up, shoulder press. You don't have to use massive weights. You don't have to do them that long, 5-10 minutes, 2-3 times a week. All you need to do to keep up the strength in tendons, because one of the things with tendons, they don't have a great blood supply. And the more you use it, the more greater the blood supply, greater, again, the strength of tendons. Obviously, when you're younger, you can still tear them, but this is usually more traumatic. You throw something, you fall onto your shoulder or something like that, and then you can get tears obviously happening as well. But it's less common. So, from 40 onwards, you're much more prone to it, especially when you get to 70, 80. I have seen quite a few people who have got complete tears, because all a person does is move their arm out quickly like that, and it goes. That's easy sometimes if you lose strength. So keep up the strength exercise. The other couple of problems, the pathologies to talk about, are twofold, and that's what's called a rotator cuff arthropathy. And what happens there is that if, and this really does happen in older age, you know, you're talking about 60, 70, oh dear, I'm in that age group, you lose complete functioning, rotator cuff arthropathy. And what happens is that that cuff of tendons that I talked about, I think it was in my first video, you've got this group, the rotator cuff group, which helps stability. They stop functioning, and what happens? They can't hold the humeral head, the head of the arm bone down. So what happens? It goes up, and when that happens, you've got no stability left in the shoulder. You can't do anything about it, and that, unfortunately, is when you have the actual rotator. You have a shoulder replacement because there's no other treatment for it. Again, that's luckily not that common, but it does exist, and conservative treatment or anything like that just doesn't help. There's a couple of others. Another condition I want to talk about, and that's impingement. This is a condition very, very common. It mainly affects supraspinatus tendon, that tendon that comes over here, is responsible for lifting your arm up. And what happens is that with impingement, you lift your arm up, and then it becomes tight. You can't move it. It impinges. It just doesn't seem to move upwards, or if it does, you can only do it with pain. And what happens here is that the tendon is either torn or injured, or indeed it swells up. So you've got less space for that tendon to move. It's a bit like, I suppose, a good analogy is that if you're traveling going through a tunnel in, say, the Alps or a mountain, and you have a car with a roof rack, what happens in impingement are twofold. The tunnel roof becomes a bit lower, and the top of the luggage carrier hits the roof, and it injures that roof, and you get a bit of swelling. So the next time you go, not only is the roof down a bit, and this is due to anatomical problems, but also that the tendon swells. So the roof, the actual luggage rack on the top of the roof swells up, or it becomes a bit higher. And then in the end, you just can't get through that tunnel. And that is the equivalent of not being able to move your shoulder then so far. And that's impingement. And it's due to some people just have less space. It's not their fault. It's just as they get older, the space narrows a bit, and also they've inherited a small canal for that tendon to come through. Or you can get what's called an osteophyte, which is a basic bony spur. The ligaments around their ossify, they become hardened. And what happens when you lift your shoulder up, that bit of bone sticks into the tendon, and it causes an injury, and it swells up, and in the end it's just a vicious circle. And in those cases, which I'll get into in my next talk, they can be treated, but it causes a lot of inflammation and pain, and the person can't move it, and that is the condition called impingement. And the two treatments, and again, it's more for the next my next talk in video number 4, but I'll just mention it very quickly. Conservative treatment can help, so can steroid injection, and so can I. Using mobilization acupuncture, it's you get about 70% success rates in helping people to improve functioning, but more of that in the next talk. The last thing I really wanted to talk about on when shoulders go wrong, or the rotator cuff goes wrong, is the whole inflammatory process. I mentioned it in impingement, when the tendon swells up and becomes inflamed. And In some cases, it can be overwhelming. The person doesn't sleep at night. So and with the best will in the world, many cases just don't respond, or they're in such pain they can't sleep. And this is when steroids can be quite useful. And steroids are injected from, well, I can't really get that. It's my own impingement back there, and the steroid is put all around the top of the joint. A steroid injection, what it does is a very strong anti-inflammatory. It dampens down inflammation. It doesn't cure anything, but that in many cases is enough just to break the vicious circle of pain and inflammation. And if you do that, a person can sleep and relax. And the other thing is, if it's overwhelming and a person is overwhelming pain, it's quite important to get them out of pain, because if you do, then you can work on them physically again. So it's not a panacea, but in some cases can be useful, particularly if they don't respond to other measures. And it can be done what's called blindly. You just inject it straight, or it can very often be done under ultrasound guidance, so you can see exactly where you put it. It doesn't work in all cases, but it is something that can be done, as I've said or mentioned, that when you do this, if a patient's pain is subdued, you can work on it physically, and they can improve without the recourse for surgery. And the last thing I want to talk about is a condition called subacromial bursitis. And this is a bursa, which is a water pocket that inflames, and they nearly always inflame the shoulder problem. So in many cases, I get people have been diagnosed with subacromial bursitis. And really, it doesn't really tell you much. It just tells you've got a shoulder problem and the water pocket's inflamed. And the treatment for that, and again, that's more in the next talk, is of course treat the cause of the shoulder problem, because that's why the bursa is inflamed. But again, going back, the reason I mention it is that a steroid injection can help subdue that bursa inflammation, and therefore reduce pain and discomfort. So yeah, I think I've talked about the main things about when the rotator cuff group goes wrong, and when the main thing with shoulder problems related to the rotator cuff group. So that's the end of talk number 3, video 3. The next one will be about treatment. Does it help, and what treatment does help? So I hope to see you in number 4. Thanks for watching, and hope you like it.